The crumbling lands were silent, a heavy silence, like the world itself had lost the ability to breathe. Rael Stryker, Laya Vorin, and Orion Vex walked through the ruins, their footsteps echoing on the shattered stones, reminders of a time when life still thrived. Now the structures floated in the void, like ghosts of a distant past. What remained were just fragments of what had once been a grand civilization, now torn apart by collapse. At every corner, the wind howled, carrying with it the scent of destruction, of something irreparably broken. Their journey led them down a treacherous path, where time seemed to have lost all meaning. Each ruin seemed to carry an echo of the past, markings etched in the stones showing that someone long before the catastrophe had known what was coming. Rael, with his sharp eyes, stopped in front of one of these markings, the inscriptions almost wiped away by the erosion of time. Something wasn't right. How could someone have predicted this collapse? And more importantly, why? The answer seemed buried somewhere, but where? Laya, standing beside Rael, gazed at the horizon where the shadows of ancient beasts moved slowly among the debris. They were nothing more than echoes of a lost time, but their presence was real, threatening. The answer is here, among these ruins, Laya murmured, her voice trembling with anxiety. She felt that every step they took brought them closer to the truth, but also farther away from the safety the old world once offered. Orion, the quietest of the trio, kept a constant watch. The map he carried, now smudged by rain and wear, showed an uncertain path, but it pointed toward the heart of the collapse. We have to keep going. The truth is beyond all of this, he said, his deep voice full of determination. The trio had no choice but to move forward, even with the shadows threatening to swallow everything around them. The wind picked up as they moved, as if the world itself was trying to push them away from what they were about to uncover. What was hidden deep within the collapse that could alter their fate? And why did the ruins seem to move? Rael felt a connection to the place, a strange feeling like something was watching him. Time and reality seemed distorted, and the shadows of the beasts became more vivid, almost tangible. As they advanced, Orion stepped back, his eyes locked on a broken structure in the distance. Look at this, he said, pointing to a partially destroyed monument. The inscriptions there were similar to the ones they had found earlier, but more complex. Rael, now more uneasy than ever, approached and touched the stones. A cold sensation ran through his body, and he had a quick vision, a flash of light, followed by an overwhelming darkness. The beasts around them, now closer, seemed to feel the same ominous presence. The trio prepared themselves, with Rael at the front, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Whatever was out there, it wasn't there by chance. They were about to discover that the fragments of the lost world weren't just ruins from a distant past. There was something more, something that could change everyone's fate, something that was waiting to be revealed. The collapse wasn't the end, but a beginning, and the real battle was about to start. And so, as the shadows closed in, Rael, Laya, and Orion prepared for the unknown, knowing that the truth they sought would take them beyond everything they had ever known. The path ahead was dark, but the only way forward was to keep going. The ruins of the ancient temple loomed like broken shadows beneath a sky cracked open by dimensional rifts. The silence was thick, heavy with echoes from ages past. Rael Stryker clenched his fists as Laya Vorin and Orion Vex moved alongside him, their eyes sharp for the slightest movement among the debris. They had been drawn to this place by whispers of the collapse, clues that would lead them to the heart of the catastrophe. But something was waiting for them in the shadows. Something that shouldn't exist. The first attack came without warning. Blades of energy sliced through the air, forcing the group to dodge amid the wreckage. From the shadows, figures emerged, wearing ancient armor adorned with runes that glowed a spectral blue. The Guardians of the Threshold. Warrior after warrior, they advanced with supernatural precision, as if they had already faced Rael and his allies before. But how was that possible? They had been sealed centuries ago. Rael felt a wave of recognition when the empty eyes of one of the Guardians locked onto him. There was something familiar in that gaze. A déjà vu distorted by time and chaos. Orion roared as he knocked one of the enemies down, but was quickly surrounded by three more. Laya danced between strikes, her blades singing like cutting wind, but for every enemy she took down, others took their place. This wasn't just a battle, it was a trial. With each strike, the Guardians not only fought with flawless skill but also seemed to be testing the group. Their blows were calculated, not meant to kill immediately, as if they were pushing them toward an inevitable fate. Rael dodged an attack by inches and shuddered as he heard his name whispered by the enemy before him. How could these warriors know him? What kept them bound to that threshold between realities? Laia slid up to Rael, her breath coming in sharp gasps. They're studying us, Rael. They know who we are. He didn't answer. Deep down he already felt it. The sensation of being stuck in a loop, like an endless déjà vu, squeezed his chest like an invisible hand. Orion, covered in dust and sweat, growled, "This ain't right. They shouldn't be here." But they were. And they were fighting with purpose. At the height of the battle, a crack in reality opened up behind the Guardians, revealing a glimpse of what seemed like multiple versions of that same moment, like they were trapped in an unchangeable fate. Rael froze. He saw himself there, standing next to Laia and Orion, fighting the same Guardians in countless realities. The collapse wasn't a one-time thing. It was a cycle, always bringing them back to the same point. The revelation hit Rael like a storm. "We've been here before, and we've failed every time." His voice was rough, barely a whisper. But if that was the truth, then why were they still fighting? How could they break this doomed cycle? The words echoed in Laia and Orion's minds, and for a brief moment hesitation took hold of them. The Guardians advanced again, no pause, no fear, no life. They were just pieces of something bigger, something that refused to let Rael and his allies escape the loop. With every blow exchanged, the certainty grew. They weren't just fighting enemies. They were facing an invisible prison, a plot woven before they were even born. Rael closed his eyes for a second and then shouted, "If this cycle keeps repeating, it's 'cause we've never made the right choice. But this time we're changing that." He gripped his blade with renewed determination. Orion and Laia exchanged a look, a silent understanding forming between them. If they were stuck in this fate, then it was time to tear apart the chains of reality. The battle resumed, but now they weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to break the cycle, to uncover the truth hidden beneath the ashes of the collapse. Whatever was waiting ahead, it couldn't be more terrifying than the thought of staying trapped forever. The ruins of the ancient temple loomed like broken shadows under a sky cracked open by dimensional rifts. The silence was thick, heavy with echoes from past ages. Rael Stryker clenched his fists as Laia Vorin and Orion Vex moved beside him, their eyes sharp for the slightest movement among the rubble. They'd been drawn to this place by whispers of the collapse, clues leading them to the heart of the catastrophe. But something was waiting for them in the shadows. Something that shouldn't exist. The first attack came without warning. Blades of energy sliced through the air, forcing the group to dodge among the debris. From the shadows, figures emerged, wearing ancient armor adorned with runes that glowed a spectral blue. The Guardians of the Threshold. Warrior after warrior, they moved with supernatural precision, like they'd already fought Rael and his allies before. But how was that even possible? They'd been sealed away centuries ago. Rael felt a wave of recognition when the empty eyes of one of the Guardians locked onto him. There was something familiar about that gaze. A déjà vu warped by time and chaos. Orion roared as he took down one of the enemies, but soon he was surrounded by three more. Laia danced between strikes, her blades singing like cutting wind, but for every enemy she took down, others took their place. This wasn't just a fight, it was a trial. With every strike, the Guardians not only fought with flawless skill, but they also seemed to be testing the group. Their blows were calculated, not meant to kill right away, like they were pushing them toward an inevitable fate. Rael dodged an attack by a hair and felt a chill as he heard his name whispered by the enemy in front of him. How could these warriors know him? What was keeping them tied to this threshold between realities? Laia slid up to Rael again, her breath ragged. "They're studying us, Rael. They know who we are." He didn't respond. Deep down he felt it too. The sensation of being stuck in that repetitive loop, that eternal déjà vu, tightening his chest like an invisible hand. Orion, dirty with dust and sweat, growled, "This ain't right. They shouldn't be here." But they were. And they were fighting with purpose. At the peak of the battle, a crack in reality opened behind the Guardians, revealing a glimpse of what looked like multiple versions of that same moment, as if they were trapped in an unchangeable destiny. Rael froze. He saw himself there, alongside Laia and Orion, fighting the same Guardians in countless realities. The collapse wasn't just one event. It was a cycle, always bringing them back to the same point. The revelation hit Rael like a storm. We've been here before, and we've failed every single time. His voice was rough, almost a whisper. But if that was the truth, then why were they still fighting? How could they break this cursed cycle? The words echoed in Laia and Orion's minds, and for a brief moment hesitation took hold of them. The Guardians advanced again, no pause, no fear, no life. They were just pieces of something bigger, something that refused to let Rael and his allies escape the repetition. With every blow exchanged, the certainty grew. They weren't just facing enemies. They were facing an invisible prison, a plot that was set long before they were even born. Rael closed his eyes for a second and then shouted, "If this cycle keeps repeating, it's because we've never made the right choice. But this time we're changing that." He gripped his blade with renewed determination. Orion and Laia exchanged a look, a silent understanding forming between them. If they were bound to this fate, then it was time to tear the chains of reality apart. The battle restarted, but now they weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to break the cycle, to uncover the truth hidden beneath the ashes of the collapse. Whatever awaited them ahead, it couldn't be scarier than the thought of being trapped forever. The crack in reality began to pulse, emitting an unstable glow. Rael felt a call from within it, an echo of something he didn't fully understand, but that seemed to whisper the answer to his liberation. Laia narrowed her eyes and stepped forward, determined. Orion hesitated for a moment, but then roared in defiance and followed. Rael took a step ahead, feeling the truth drawing near. And then the world shattered around them. The submerged city was engulfed in an absolute silence. The kind of silence that can only exist when life itself seems to have been swallowed by the darkness. Rael, Laia, and Orion moved through the ruins of a lost time, their feet crushing what remained of the stones and bones of a civilization that was once grand. The air was thick, heavy with an ancestral weight, as if the world itself was watching them, suspended. And then they reached the heart of that forgotten city, where a black crystal monolith stood, rising from the ground, reflecting shadows and forms that seemed to collapse and rebuild with every glance. This was where the conductor was, or rather what was left of him. Laia cautiously approached, feeling the cold of the crystal seep into her skin. She could see, in its liquid shadows, flashes of a power that would transcend any human understanding. The conductor, the being who had once mastered the laws of reality, was there, trapped in a state of disconnection, as if his body and soul were in an eternal cycle of rebirth. But the strangest thing was that he didn't seem to be in control of his own essence. Something or someone had imprisoned him. Rael watched the monolith with a grim expression. He knew this discovery was crucial, but he also felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. They were standing before something that even the Guardians of the Threshold didn't fully understand. The conductor wasn't just an important piece in the puzzle, he was the key to understanding what had broken the veil of reality. Why had he been imprisoned? And most importantly, who had imprisoned him? The answer seemed to hide behind every shard of crystal, every shadow cast by the ruins. Orion, who had remained silent until then, finally approached the monolith. His eyes were intensely fixed on the figure that now reflected in the crystal walls. He looked more like a shadow than a human being. He tried to prevent the collapse, Orion murmured as if speaking to himself. But what no one knows is that the true power was inside him. And that power is what attracted the ruin. The silence that followed was profound, weighed down by an overwhelming heaviness. Laia didn't know what to feel. The idea that this being who knew the truths of the world could be the last shred of hope was both comforting and terrifying. They needed answers. But when the conductor was freed, what would happen to the balance that still remained in the world? And if he had been imprisoned for a reason no one yet understood? Everything was collapsing around them, and the sense of urgency was growing stronger with every passing moment. Rael stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the crystal that still pulsed with strange and unsettling energy. He could feel the tension in the air as if something was about to happen, but the uncertainty kept him from taking the next step. Their fate was intertwined with that monolith, with the conductor, but the question was, what would they do with this revelation? Uncovering more secrets could bring answers, but it could also cost them their lives. He knew that and felt the weight of each choice. And then, the monolith began to vibrate softly, as if responding to their presence. Rael didn't know if it was the conductor's energy or some other unknown force, but the feeling that something was about to change took over his body. He looked at his friends, their expressions immersed in a mixture of curiosity and fear. There was no turning back now. They were about to unleash something that could either save or destroy everything that remained. The tension grew even more when a red line of light appeared in the cracks of the crystal, as if time itself was being torn apart. Something was approaching. Rail knew they could wait no longer. The conductor needed to be freed, no matter the consequences. The future of everyone depended on it. But as the crystal pulsed and the shadow of truth rose before them, the only thing left was one unanswered question. Who or what had imprisoned them, and why were they now being called to face this dark force? When the crystal finally shattered, the reality around Rael, Laia, and Orion seemed to distort. What was once a landscape of ruins and shadows was now transforming into something beyond any logical explanation. The conductor, now freed, began to reconfigure in the center of the broken monolith, his form becoming a fusion of light and shadow, as if he were both a creature of flesh and a fragment of reality itself. He looked at the three of them with an expression that seemed to capture not only the present moment, but also the possibilities of what was still to come. His gaze was both welcoming and terrifying, as if he knew something they could not comprehend. Rael took a hesitant step forward, the feeling that the weight of all existence was resting on his shoulders. "What is this? What's happening?" he asked, his voice echoing in the emptiness. The conductor, with a smooth motion, stretched out one hand, and a wave of energy flowed through the space, creating ripples in the air, like the very essence of the place was tearing apart. The truth was clear. They had awakened something much bigger than they had ever imagined. "I am the line that connects the worlds," the conductor's voice echoed inside their minds, still and yet filling the space around them with a gravity that seemed to come from all directions. "The veil that separates what's real from what lies beyond, what you know from what can't be seen. The ruin you witnessed wasn't an accident, but an inevitable consequence. And now, what you choose to do with this knowledge will determine the fate of everything that remains." Laia looked at Rael and Orion, her pale face reflecting a mix of fear and understanding. The conductor's words weren't just about the past, but about the future. The weight of the choice was clear. If they failed, the veil would be torn irreversibly, and the force of the shadows would spread across the world, consuming everything that was known and loved. But if they succeeded, they could restore balance. But the mission would require more sacrifices than they could imagine. Orion, always the strategist, now seemed more like a shadow than a man. He stepped up to the conductor, his gaze determined. "So this is it? We're here to stop the total collapse? To save what's left, or to condemn what's already gone?" His voice trembled, but there was strength in his words, a certainty that was beginning to form. The conductor tilted his head, as if examining Orion with a wisdom that transcended time. "The choice isn't just yours," the conductor replied. "It's for all who still have the power to see the truth. The veil is weakening, and the lines that connect the worlds are starting to unravel. Every decision you make from this point on will affect not just the present, but all possible realities." Rael closed his eyes, feeling the pressure of the conductor's words crushing his mind. The weight of responsibility was no longer just an abstract thought. He wasn't only fighting for his own survival or the survival of others, but for something much bigger, something he couldn't even fully understand. What was at stake wasn't just their future, but the future of all realities, all timelines that now seemed intertwined in an invisible web of fates. When he opened his eyes again, he looked at Laia and Orion. They were united, but Rael knew that this bond could be tested in ways they hadn't even imagined. They were on the brink of something that could consume everything they knew. The conductor, in his infinite complexity, seemed to be just the beginning of something much bigger. But what was it? What awaited them beyond the veil? The question hung in the air as the world around them began to disintegrate, the borders between realities starting to blur. What Rael, Laia, and Orion were about to face was a new kind of battle, one not just for survival but for the very essence of what's real. They were the chosen ones, but now the true test was beginning. The veil was about to be torn, and with it, all possibilities of destruction or rebirth were within their grasp. The final choice was coming. What would the trio do? How would they shape the fate that now lay at their feet? The timelines were beginning to curve, and the echo of a new cycle was already resonating at the far reaches of the universe. The war against the shadows and the forces beyond was about to begin, and the only thing Rael knew for sure was that the future was in their hands, in the choices they would make from this moment on. The battle against the forces of the veil and the fight to restore balance between the realities had only just begun. Rael, Laia, and Orion, united by a mission greater than any of them could have imagined, were now standing before an uncertain and dangerous path. The conductor, while having given them answers, had also left behind a complex riddle about what awaited them. The veil, now broken, unleashed not just the forces of the shadows, but also the infinite possibilities of new destinies, which could either heal or destroy everything that was known. The world around them seemed to shift before their eyes, as if the very limits of reality were dissolving. With each step, the three heroes found themselves more challenged, not just by the dangers of the path ahead, but by the depth of the choices they'd have to make. What started as a simple mission to rescue something lost had now become a test of courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. Rael, with the weight of his newfound understanding, knew he wasn't just facing the outer shadows anymore, but the shadow within himself. The truth about who he was and what he represented was now clear, but he also understood that, even with the power of the keys of destiny in his hands, nothing was guaranteed. Reality was uncertain, and destinies were weaving together in a dance they still couldn't control. Laia, always the most pragmatic of the trio, saw the future with a mix of hope and fear. The conductor's words still echoed in her mind. The line between what was right and what was necessary seemed to be getting thinner. And with every step, she felt the weight of a growing responsibility, a responsibility that went beyond mere survival. Orion, the sharp-minded warrior, was the last one to doubt his mission. Even with the weight of what they were about to face, he knew that, at the end of the day, the only thing that mattered was the fight for the truth and balance. The world they lived in might be an illusion, but their fight was real, and as long as there was a chance to restore what was lost, he would keep fighting. They were just starting their journey, and the veil still kept its secrets, hidden beneath layers of mystery. But one thing was for sure, fate was no longer in the hands of those who thought they were immortal. It was in the hands of those brave enough to challenge the impossible. In the distance, the stars seemed farther away, and the horizon, once clear, now stretched out like an enigma. The forces of the veil wouldn't rest until their motives were fulfilled, but Rael, Laia, and Orion were ready for whatever came. They were prepared to face not just what lay behind the veil, but also what it would mean for the future of all realities. Because, in the end, the only way to heal what was broken was to break what was left, defying the very fate that had chosen them. And that choice wouldn't be easy, but it was theirs, and they were ready for the fight. If you like this story, don't forget to leave a comment, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more stories like this. See you in the next video.